Divine Grace A.C. Mukunda Goswami Maharaj, Prabhupada Ki Jai, Shripad Paramahansa Paripajika Acharya Stotala Sapashi Shriman, Divine Grace Shri Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, Iskan Founder Acharya Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai, Acharya Shri Haridas Thakur Ki Jai, Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Radhikara Shri Vasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Shri Radha Krishna Govardhana Sham Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana Ki Jai, Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Shri Navadvip Dham Ki Jai, Shri Mathura Dham Ki Jai, Shri Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai, Tulasi Devi Ki Jai, Ganga Maya Ki Jai, Gaur Premanandi, Hare Hare Bol, Shri Nu Govardhana Dham Ki Jai, Shama Veda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Narayana Namaskritam Namam Chavam Narotamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Vitojaya Mudilaya Nastavaeshwar Krishna Bhagavata Shevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloki Bhakti Bhavati Naishtiki, reading from Srimad Bhagavatam in the 5th canto. Chapter, is it 28? Huh? 28. What verse is it?
28, chapter 19.
Chapter 19, 28. Verse 28? Yadyatra nasvarga sukha vasheshitam Yadayatra nasvarga sukha vasheshitam Yadatra nasvarga sukha vasheshitam
Yadyatra nasvarga sukha vasheshitam
Shristasya suktasya kritasya shobhanam
Shristasya suktasya kritasya shobhanam
Shristasya Suktasya kritasya shobhanam
Shristasya suktasya kritasya shobhanam
Tanajanabe simrita janmanasyad Tanajanabe smritimaj janmanasyad Varshe hariryad bhajam shom tanoti Varshe hariryad bhajatam shantanoti Yatra nasvarga sukha bhaveshi shitam Swatasya sutasya kritasya shobhanam Tanajanabe smritima janmasya nasyad Varshe hariryad bhajatam shantavanoti Somebody else?
Whatever remains
the enjoyment of heavenly happiness. Suishatasya, of a perfect sacrifice. Sutasya, a diligent studying the Vedic literature. Kritasya, of having performed a kind act. Shobhanam, the resultant actions. Tena, by such a resultant action. Ajanabhe, in the land of Bharatavarsha. Smriti Madjanma, a birth enabling one. The lotus feet of the Lord. Naha, of us. Syat, let there be. Varshe, in the land. Hare, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yat, wherein. Vajatam, of the devotees. Shantanoti, expands the auspiciousness. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. We are now living in the heavenly planets, undoubtedly as a result of our having performed ritualistic ceremonies, pious activities, and yagyas, and having studied the Vedas. However, our lives here will one day be finished. We pray that at that time, if any merit remains from our pious activities, we may again take birth in Bharatvarsha as human beings able to remember the lotus feet of the Lord. The Lord is so kind that he personally comes to the land of Bharatvarsha and expands the good fortune of its people. Responsibly, we are now living in the heavenly planets. Undoubtedly, as a result of our having performed ritualistic ceremonies, pious activities, and yagyas, and having studied the Vedas. However, our lives here will one day be finished. We pray that at that time, if any merit remains from our pious activities, we may again take birth in Bharatvarsha. As human beings, able to remember the lotus feet of the Lord. The Lord is so kind that he personally comes to the land of Bharatavarsha and expands the good fortune of its people. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. It is certainly as a result of pious activities that one takes birth in the heavenly planets. But from those planets, one must nevertheless come down again to earth, as stated in Bhagavad Gita, Shine Punye Martalokam Vishanti. Even the demigods must return to earth to work like ordinary men when the results of their pious activities expire. Nevertheless, the demigods desire to come to the land of Bharatvarsha, even if a small portion of the merits of their pious activities remains. In other words, to take birth in Bharatvarsha, one must perform more pious activities than the demigods. In Bharatavarsha, one is naturally Krishna conscious, and if one further cultivates his Krishna consciousness, by the grace of Krishna, he certainly expands his good fortune by becoming perfect in Krishna consciousness, and very easily going back home, back to Godhead. In many other places in the Vedic literature, it is found that even the demigods want to come to this land of Bharatvarsha. A foolish person may desire to be promoted to the heavenly planets as a result of his pious activities, but even the demigods from the heavenly planets want to come to Bharatvarsha and achieve bodies that may be very easily cultivatable to Krishna consciousness. Therefore, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu repeatedly says, Bharatabhumi te hoila manusya janma jar, janma sartaka kari kara para upakar. A human being born in the land of Bharatvarsha has a special prerogative to develop Krishna consciousness. Therefore, those already born in Bharatvarsha should take lessons from Shastra and Guru, and should fully take advantage of the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in order to be fully equipped with Krishna consciousness. By taking full advantage of Krishna consciousness, one goes back home, back to Godhead. Yanti Madhyajinopi Mam. The Krishna consciousness movement is therefore spreading this facility to human society by opening many centers all over the world so that people may associate with the pure devotees of the Krishna consciousness movement, understand the science of Krishna consciousness, and ultimately go back home, back to Godhead. Verse again, we are now living in the heavenly planets, undoubtedly as a result of our having performed ritualistic ceremonies, pious activities, and yagyas, and having studied the Vedas. However, our lives here will remain one day unfinished. However, our lives here will one day be finished. We pray that at that time, if any merit remains from our pious activities, we may again take birth in Bharatvarsha as human beings able to remember the lotus feet of the Lord. The Lord is so kind that He personally comes to the land of Bharatvarsha and expands the good fortune of the people. Ukam karoti vachalam pangam laga tegirim yakri pataraham vande shigurudhigatane. This verse is speaking about the benefits of being born in Bharatvarsha. Not just being born in Bharatvarsha, but being born as human beings able to remember the lotus feet of the Lord. Unfortunately, many people that are born in the land of Bharatvarsha as human beings are unable to remember the lotus feet of the Lord. And sometimes Prabhupada has talked about them as being the new crows. I don't know if some of you have seen these landfills in India. They're not exactly landfills, they're more like mountains of waste. And they're steaming sometimes, and there's crows that are picking away at the refuse. So sometimes Prabhupada called the people that were born in Bharatvarsha the new crows, because what happens is when the mountain reaches a certain level, another mountain of refuse is begun. That's the new mountain. So the crows then go over to the new mountain of waste. So the new mountain was sometimes referred to, or the crows of the new mountain were referred to as the new crows. And the people that were born in Bharatvarsha who came to the United States to learn technology were called the new crows by Prabhupada. Sort of a very unpleasant and very heavy thing to say, but Prabhupada called them the new crows. It was in 1967 in Berkeley, California. There was a big hall, and it was very dark, and Prabhupada was lecturing from the stage of that hall. It was very dark, and only you could see Prabhupada and a few devotees on the stage. There were maybe 2,000 people in this hall. There were students at the University of California at Berkeley. And it was advertised, so a lot of people came. And it was one of the first times I ever heard Prabhupada get angry. One of the students asked him, "Why are you coming here?" It was kind of a challenging voice. And I've come here, she said, it was a lady, to study technology. And why are you coming here? Because no one's really caring about these old ways and these superstitions and these stories that you're telling. And Prabhupada, in the dark, sort of detected that this person who was speaking was born in India, kind of picked up the accent. And he said something like, "Oh, in India?" And he kind of recognized her as a compatriot. And his answer was very direct and very heavy. He said something like, "You're a beggar and I'm a giver. That you've come to learn technology to take back to your place of birth. It's a very kind of westernized thing to increase technology and increase the technology of the West. Whereas I've come to give things. I've come I've come to give spiritual knowledge. I've come to elevate these people like yourself." And he was very angry, and it was one of the first times that I ever saw Prabhupada get angry. But he detected that this was a person who had come to take things back, to take things away from America and take it back to India, whereas he was a giver. And there was someone, I don't know if he was in Accra, that was where it was written, Accra, Ghana, in Africa somewhere, and he was saying that, he was quoting something from Vedic literature saying that the leaves don't actually enjoy themselves. And it was kind of a way of saying that if you come from that land, that you have the duty to give people Krishna consciousness, as it's stated here, Bharata Bhumi Te Hoila Manusha Janma Jar Janma Sartaka Kari Kara Para Upakar. A human being born in the land of Bharatvarsha has a special prerogative to develop Krishna consciousness. Those already born in Bharatvarsha should take lessons from the Shastra and Guru and should fully take advantage of the mercy of Lord Krishna. Today's the last day of Kartik, is it? Pretty much. The last day. Anyway, when Krishna came to this part of the universe, to this world, where there's a place where he comes, that's why people like to take birth in Bharatvarsha. He exhibited some very unusual qualities. And sometimes Krishna is known for being very intelligent or tricky, is another way to say it. When the battle of Kurukshetra was taking place, he asked Yudhisthira to go to Duryodhana and say that his son had died. I think Duryodhana had some kind of a benediction that he wouldn't die unless he was told that his son had died before. So Krishna asked Yudhisthira to get this, and Krishna himself could have gone and said this to Duryodhana, but he was known as being very intelligent and very tricky, and therefore many people wouldn't have believed him. In fact, people wouldn't have believed him. But Yudhisthira had the reputation for being very honest and never telling lies. Although he hesitated a little bit from this instruction to tell a lie, he did it, and thus Dronacharya was able to be defeated. It's very interesting that in the very beginning of the war, Arjuna fired an arrow at Dronacharya. Dronacharya was a great Brahmin, and he wasn't considering that the Pandavas were destined to kill him. But what happened was Arjuna fired an arrow at him, and it just didn't actually stick in his body, it landed at his feet, and it was his way of offering obeisances to his martial arts guru. And then Dronacharya fired an arrow back at Arjuna, and instead of sticking into the body, it just sort of grazed the top of his head. It was his way of saying that I'm blessing you, I'm giving you a blessing. My blessing to you is that you can kill me. It was a very strange blessing, but the Brahmins were very liberal, and they would, in those days, they would give blessings or give instructions to anyone, even if they were destined to kill him in the future, which is what happened with Dronacharya. So Krishna he had that reputation for being very intelligent or very tricky. And in this Damodar Leela, when Yashoda tries to bind him by getting more and more ropes, and finding that they're always too short, because Krishna was indirectly saying that because I'm the Lord of the universe, it's impossible to bind me to a grinding mortar, no matter how much rope is gotten. And then he felt very compassionate, and he was actually crying real tears at that time. That's a very unique thing, because Mother Yashoda was such a great devotee. And when he saw that she was very exhausted and perspiring by trying to bind him and being unable to, he said, that's when he relented and let her bind him to the grinding mortar. So he played the role of a very perfect son and a very, very fearful child, and he was actually crying real tears, even though Yashoda was unable to bind him and was unsuccessful. And in a way he was showing that he was the Supreme Lord, that he couldn't be bound. In another way he was showing that he was very compassionate upon his mother. So Krishna is very tricky. When he married the 16,108 wives, they had all been kidnapped by Banasura, the demon. And because they had been kidnapped, they couldn't return home. There was a kind of custom at that time that if the ladies were kidnapped, or in some ways they had some previous relation with men, they couldn't be touched by other men, even their own fathers, who were their protectors. So after Krishna killed Banasura, and after they were released from their captivity, Krishna told them they could return to their parents, and they said, we can't go back to our fathers because the fathers won't accept us because we've been kidnapped. So then Krishna asked them what they wanted, and they said that we want you to marry us. And Krishna said, okay, I'll do that. Not only did he marry them, but he created a big palace for each wife. So it was a very special thing that God was able to marry 16,000 people and 16,108 wives and create a very great palace. And there's a statement in the, I think it's in the Bhagavatam, where Narada Muni is checking Krishna out and going from one palace to the other to see if it's the same Krishna doing the same things. And he was doing a different thing in each palace. In one palace he was talking to his children, in another palace he was talking to his wife, in another place he was relaxing. So he did some very extraordinary things. Another extraordinary thing Krishna did when he came here was he prevented Duryodhana from being completely ironized. When Duryodhana was having this mace battle, this club battle with Bhima, he was actually almost like completely iron, and Bhima was hitting him on the top of the head, and he was going down into the ground, just like a carpenter drives a nail into the ground. He was so heavily ironized. And the idea was that Gandhari, because she was very austere and a very great yogini, when she removed her blindfold, she would have great power in her eyesight, and she would be able to turn the body of her son Duryodhana into iron. So Krishna saw him proceeding to his mother to get this blessing to be completely ironized, and he saw that he was proceeding towards Gandhari in a completely naked way. He said, "You can't go before